Welcome to Connections Forum for Relationship Expression and Healing. And the topic today is a very special interview we have with George Green on the topic of self-talk and what to do to deal with this negative self-talk, such as racing thoughts and the resulting stress. My name is Margherita Lotus, and I'm a life and business mentor who help stressed and overwhelmed women to overcome their problems so that they can have satisfying relationships and flourishing careers. Heidi, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Heidi Hornlein, and I'm a transformational coach and a relationship counselor and also a voice coach. And I'm the leader of a retreat in Italy for couples and single people who want to create better relationships.
Our special guest today, George Green, is a creator and facilitator of lucid living training and mentoring experience skills. He is a multi-talented mentor and coach, and also a video producer, copywriter, voiceover talent, author, poet, eternal child of wonder. And he is the founder of and CEO of the mindfulnessadvantage.com since 2005. Hi and welcome.
Hello, and thank you both for inviting me to be on today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so this first question I want to ask you is, what kind of problems do you help your clients with?
If there was an overarching theme, and there is, it's I help and assist people in managing and manifesting sustainable change. So rather than focus on a single problem, it's our overall challenge and how do we sustain change. Many people end up making a big push in some way or another to get in better shape, or maybe they want to write a book, and we're so patterned for familiarity that when we move into new behavior, our neurophysiology actually resists that change. And so part of what I do is give people a system of tools, what I call a new playground, where they can learn how to commit to their changes and recommit over and over and over again until they achieve their success.
That's so great, George. It's having many different levels of approach. Great. So we know that stress is a frequent culprit for both physical and psychological problems, such as insomnia, anxiety, job loss, and relationship issues, and also linked with the incessant chatter we call self-talk and racing thoughts. Can you clarify for us what these terms actually are?
Yes, indeed. Well, again, the core of our ability to manifest and sustain sustainable change in the way the lucid living program is designed is through an active and daily practice of mindfulness. Whatever our level of awareness is of our self-talk, of that inner chatter, what some people call our monkey mind, the reality is that we're only aware of a tiny tip of the iceberg. And so what that self-talk is composed of are our assumptions and agreements and consents to limit, to doubt, to fear. And the amazing thing is that most of us are not very present at all to how much that inner narrative drives and controls us.
Yeah. So let's say we talk about this inner chatter. In your experience, how would that manifest for your clients?
How it manifests, let's take an example of I decide to write a book, which I'm actually doing. The inner chatter manifests as a resistance. Again, we're not very much aware of the depth of that chatter, but there may be aspects of myself that think, who am I to be a published author? Or aspects of my deep unconscious self that question my ability to write in a way that can be easily consumed or appreciated by, by my readership. Again, the inner chatter constitutes some lack of alignment with our outcome and our goal, whether it be doubt or some form of resistance, or part of our inner chatter and resistance is redirecting ourselves away from our goal and our outcome. And the reality is we live in a culture that's steeped in massive distraction.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, when it comes to racing thoughts, do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I have a great example. There is one. It's literally amazing to discover how pervasive anxiety is in our culture. We would be surprised to find out that some of the people that we perceive really have their lives wired, that literally suffer from the same thing so many other people do, which is anxiety. So in a way, our racing thoughts in the context of anxiety is the brain and conscious and unconscious mind racing towards the future and worrying about something that hasn't yet happened, and or writing a script about what's going to happen that is unfortunately not in alignment with our highest outcomes. That makes sense.
So how common is it that people have these self-talks? Do we do it, everyone, or is
everybody? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some amazing metrics out there that are interesting to get our head and hearts around. One science has determined that on average we have somewhere between 65,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day. And those same scientists have determined that on average most of us are at best only fully present, awake, aware, and on purpose somewhere between 3 and 7% of our waking lives. The rest of the time we're in some pattern, familiar movement or behavior that doesn't require very much presence. So essentially what we're looking at is, in the course of your day, maybe 2,000 of your thoughts are actually focused and aligned. So in that depth of unconscious thought and narrative is where our racing thoughts and our thoughts of anxiety live and exist. Because we're so familiar and we're wired cognitively for familiarity, we become deaf and unaware of those narratives as they play out, and they filter our perceptions and they drive our behavior.
Yeah, those numbers are kind of a bit scary. So my conclusion of that is that we're not very present at all most of the time. Is that not true?
Relative to our capacity to be present, that is absolutely true. When we see great leaders, masters, maestros, champions, people who've achieved extraordinary results, that's always as a result of their ability to focus and refocus over and over and over again with mindful presence. And what are they present to? One, they're present to their outcome, their goal, but they also, through mindfulness and presence, they learn how to connect everything they're doing to their desired outcome. That's part of our key to success. Is sometimes we operate from this space of separation or compartmentalization, and the reality is those people who are models for us for excellence and achievement recognize and operate from a place where even taking the garbage out is, in their world, connected to, publishing their book or composing a wonderful concerto or, reaching some physical limit and exceeding that.
Yeah, I mean, I do have some role models for that, like meditators or real masters of meditation and stuff like that. So how can we approach, so do you actually think that if we become more present, can we reduce that anxious thoughts or these racing thoughts and this negative self-talk?
Yes, actually, and I'm a student of and trained in conscious language, so the upgrade I would invite and offer is rather than if, it's when. Yes, I agree with your statement. When we're more present, when we're more mindful, we're able to be present to and witness to what formerly operated in our unconscious mind and bring that thought, that narrative, that memory, that energy into the light of our awareness. And again, mindfulness is very much about the being rather than the doing. So other than being present to and witness to what's active in the moment, we're really not required to do anything other than to be compassionate for ourselves. As we bring what's unconscious and patterned into our awareness, there's a natural diffusion of that energy and pattern. It's literally what's called a pattern interrupt. And so from a mindful space, we can make new choices and develop new habits that turn into traits and patterns that replace the unconscious ones.
Yes, that's very helpful to know. Heidi, do you have a question for George right now?
I don't have a question at the moment, but I would give a little bit a down-to-earth example of what he's talking about. And just what happened to me about half an hour ago or an hour ago, I went with my dog education walk up the hill, and then I came back down in the wood. And in the woods there are wild pigs, and it is almost dark, and I hear this noise of a pig, and the thoughts came up and the anxiety came up. Oh, if this is a wild pig. And I realized that, these are thoughts. If I allow them to go on, I will be fearful. And I remember that the neighbor has normal pigs up there in his fence. And so I convinced myself, no, this is not a wild pig. Why should it come now? And it's a normal pig, and I can go on. So the thing is to really first realize that you have these thoughts, that they evoke emotions, and then check them out. Is this thought real? Is this thought, is it right at the moment? So you better run if it is a wild pig, or if is it not? And so I can calm down and I can do what I plan to do. So just as an example.
It's a wonderful example, and it's kind of a metaphor for our thoughts in general. Are they domesticated thoughts? Are they thoughts that are anchored in truth and reality? Or do we spin that experience up into a feral pig or a wild thought or a thought that generates our anxiety and our fear? So Heidi, that's a wonderful example of you, one, listening to your own self-talk, and having a very present relationship and dialogue with yourself and what you were feeling in order to manage your fear, your anxiety, and return yourself to an objective state.
Yeah, it took a little practice. I remember a certain moment many years ago now, but that I became, doing a course, I became aware that I had these thoughts. Before, the thoughts were sort of, that I was inside of all this chatter. I was not aware of it, and it took really somebody telling me that I was immersed in this constant chatter. And then I thought, oh, it's true. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
That's universally true for most everyone. One of the things that I learned through my training in conscious language is our language is the most accessible and surface indicator of what we think, feel, and believe. And so a great example was the upgrade I offered was from if to when. A lot of people who have aspirations. For instance, the book I'm writing, Prayers for the Beloved. That was unconscious language just then. That was spontaneous. The book, okay. My book takes ownership, and that's something I practice in my authorship and writing, is to be conscious of the fact of, if it's the book, I am really not taking ownership of the fact that my desire, my outcome, is to be a published author. When you're a published author, you refer to your book as my book, not the book. Does that make sense?
Very, very good. I mean, I have published a book, so I could count myself in the category of that, and I think that it's a very worthwhile effort to do, because one actually have to mindfully plot out the course of what one has to do to make that happen. So yeah, so that's a very good example as well. So what other things do you think that one can do to actually reduce symptoms of this constant chatter?
Well, it always falls to one thing, and that is, when you're ruled. So I just upgraded my language to conscious from if to when. When you're ruled by your unconscious mind, your memories, your fears, your doubts, the only real sustainable remedy is to become more present, more mindful, more resident in your body. And how that works initially in the practice and training of mindfulness is, once you're more used to being in your body more, you can recognize and ask yourself, how am I feeling in any given moment? And for my client partners, how I make it as simple and elegant as possible is this statement: you're either in any moment moving into and towards your greatest outcomes, dreams and visions, or you're moving out of, away from, and separate from them. Either one of those states has a very recognizable feeling. When you're in your power, when you're in your purpose, it's a very expansive feeling. It's epiphanous even. It's inspiring, and certainly you're feeling that expansive experience in your body, your mind, and your heart. Anything less than that, there are various shades of gray that go all the way to the full-on contraction of fear or doubt or resistance. And that's a way for us to begin to moderate and eventually learn how to do pattern interrupts on these deeply ingrained shadows, what I call shadow patterns or inner arguments, so that we can, one, reclaim our authority and sovereignty in and over our lives and become the author of our new story, which is our new story is, what is your greatest outcome? What is your dream, your vision? And that's a great question to ask from a mindful space as well. Many people have a rather nebulous idea or story around that, or some people even consider that they don't know their purpose. Upon deeper introspection and observance, even the people who say, I don't have my purpose, have a much greater sense of purpose and grasp of their purpose than that mind chatter would intimate.
Yeah, that's cool. That's yeah. It leaves food for thought, definitely.
Interrupt patterns.
Yes.
I would, in what I'm teaching and coaching, I would more call that a transformation than interruption, because interrupted seems to be bang, as if you know cut something out. I'm more for the let's say smooth way and turn it around, because we need patterns for survival. We need patterns, but what we need is to transform the non-functional patterns into patterns which are better. You know,
Yes.
so let's say patterns of behavior. What you were talking about is more the unfunctional patterns, I think, which we get which are unconscious.
And unconscious, yeah.
Yeah.
So the word interrupt, it is very sharp, and interrupting can feel very penetrating. The idea is, as we become aware of these very pernicious unconscious patterns, it's our presence and our awareness that interrupts that unconscious quality and brings it into the conscious, and therein lies the ability to transform ourselves. So I totally agree. I think it's very generative and highly functional to even soften that language and say, you know, our mindfulness, our awareness is a way to transform our unconscious narratives into newly conscious and upgraded language and narratives.
Because, as I said, we need new patterns. We cannot think everything from the beginning to the end in every moment. So sometimes we need to be on autopilot. But in everyday life, you know, you cannot sit in meditation for 24 hours and, you know, in normal actions in the world take some attention too. So if we have made it conscious, these unconscious patterns, and then transform them, then we easily can put them as new patterns leave them into the new unconscious, let's say. But it's a higher level of unconscious when we want to call it in this way.
Indeed.
So what is, in your opinion, the number one thing one should do when one have sort of a crisis of an attack? It could be an anxiety attack, or these racing thoughts just go on and on and on, and you can't do anything about it, you think. What is the first thing you would suggest a person would do?
That's a wonderful question. Actually, again, the core of the training, my training upgrade, of lucid living and mindfulness is learning how to breathe and rest all of our attention upon our breath and our body. That is the practice. The daily mindfulness practice is a mindful breath practice. You're learning how to focus your attention on one thing so that when you direct your attention, you can sustain it in certain areas. Two, by being in a measured and rhythmic breath on a biological, physiological, nuts and bolts level, you affect the unconscious pattern of crisis or anxiety or reaction. And actually, so the one thing that you can do when you're presented with a crisis, whether it's an inner crisis that you manifest within your own thoughts and feelings, or something on the external where you're either invited to react or consciously act upon, is to move into your breath. Breathe deeply. And sustain your awareness of how you're feeling. The reality is, when we move into a deeper, more rhythmic breath, with each exhale, we are able to harness an automatic function within our body and physiology that sheds stress. So when you focus on your breath and breathing, and you deepen your breath, you're instantly lowering the level of stress that's inviting you to move into fight or flight and survival patterns that are all about automatic and unconscious reaction. It's how we stay in our bodies and stay into a better space and platform that enables and empowers us to make choices of action rather than reacting.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would then bring it back into reality. That is, let's say, an advice for men having their belt less tight, because when you have a tight belt, you cannot breathe deeply. And women, imagine when they have all these narrow dresses on, be more comfortable with your dresses. And I was thinking about the time when women were forced into these corsets. How can you breathe when it's all closed here, your body? So it is physiological normal that you enter into stress and anxiety. So the more your body is free, the more the breath can flow until the deep parts of your body, the more you have the possibility to be quiet and to calm down.
Indeed. And the corset is a great metaphor for how we have forgotten how to breathe and how we've learned to imprint our survival, our fear, our fight or flight into our body and into our respiratory patterns. If you invite 10 people in the same room to stand up and take a deep breath, you will see 10 different varieties of restricted breathing. It's amazing. I've done this in some of my group trainings where one person will be all lift. You'll just see their shoulders go up, but no expansion of the chest, and another person might be all belly breath. And then some people, you can't even see any movement. They're literally breathing against such a ingrained contraction that you can't notice the movement of their breath. And so what's very powerful about moving into our breath in a mindful way is that we can begin to release whatever that pattern is of contraction and survival, and again, on a very nuts and bolts physiological level, embrace the expansion and surrender of our breath and move back into a place of remembering how we originally were breathing when we first came out of our mother's bellies.
Yeah, I can say something too, because a very good way to really learn breathing again is learning to sing in a very good way, because when your voice needs to sound, it needs to have a good breath. When you have a squeaky voice, normally your breath is not good. So it's a really good correlation which you can see.
Actually, I love that. I mean, that's a great invitation, because singing involves rhythmic breath, and in order for us to sing, we really have to bring in this volume of air and then meter it out in a conscious way. And actually, the mindful breath practice that is my daily practice that I also share and teach is based on a scientific research study on singers and chanters. And they had two groups. One group was a Catholic group chanting the Latin Ave Maria, and the other group were Buddhists chanting the Jewel in the Lotus Sutra, Om Mani Padme Hum. And so you've got two different cultures, two different languages, Latin and Sanskrit, identical breathing rhythms. And what they found, they wired these people up in a neurofeedback lab, what they found was that the common rhythm was 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. And what they recognized was there was a cascade of coherence events that happened within their bodies that moved them out of chaos and into coherence. So part of why singing is such a beautiful practice and experience is, one, we're embracing that rhythm of breath, and two, we're literally resonating our entire body with our voice. And the more you sing, the more, and if you take classical training, you learn how to resonate your thoracic cavity, your chest, with your voice and your breath. You literally learn how to resonate your sinus cavities. So again, I love your invitation, Heidi.
And we learn to resonate the whole body, not only the breast, not only the head, but up to the feet. This is the invitation.
Every cell,
the
every
whole
cell
body
in the
vibration.
Yeah. I'm tingling right now just talking about it.
It's
This is so great. I feel like I'm vibrating over here. And also, I have another question, and that is, it's not just the tone and note of what we think inside, it's also the words and how we associate with these words, because words in itself have a vibration, right?
Yes. Well, again, it comes back to mindfulness and awareness. And yes, my spoken word has a resonance, it has an energy, and my words are either imbued with my intention, my mindful focus, or if I'm less than focused, my words will resonate with less focus. So that's on the outer. On the inner, the frequency of our inner talk has a resonance and a signature of both a neurophysiological pattern and neurochemical pattern. And again, are we stepping into our greater purpose and moving towards? Then the pattern of our language, inner language, will have a resonance and a coherence, because that's what, in that space of mindful presence, we are in agreement with our highest outcomes and our presence. If we're other than in alignment, if we're experiencing some inner state of argument or opposition or resistance, then it will have a lower frequency. And when we look at the physiological results of stress, of doubt, of fear, we see that the neurotransmitters and the stress-related chemicals like cortisol that are produced actually create illness in the body. So essentially, to address the shadow, the negativity, it's very important that we make an inner agreement to effect power with rather than power over. So one, we're not doing battle against our negative thoughts or our unconscious speech. We're simply, through a process of mindfulness, sitting with what's active, bringing our awareness upon it, and breathing with it. And that becomes a very transformative practice. One of, if I may paraphrase my conscious language teacher, Robert Tennyson Stevens, he always used to say that no shadow, no doubt, no fear, no apathy, no grief, no depression, no negative thought can survive in the blazing fire, of your heart and your presence.
That was so well said, George.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that again? Can you repeat that again so we really get that?
Yeah, and I'll preface it with this again. This is the authentic power of making friends with every aspect of ourselves, making peace, rather than trying to do battle, fight against our resistance or our doubt or our shadow. We sit with it, and we bring what was unconscious into our conscious mind in the light of our awareness. And then through doing that, it's actually a process of being rather than doing anything. to repeat the quote from Robert Tennyson Stevens, no shadow, no fear, no doubt, no apathy, no grief, no sadness, no depression can exist in the blazing fire of your heart's presence.
Awesome. I think we come to the end of this interview, and I want to ask Heidi, do you have any more questions for George?
I actually don't. I think he has explained it very concisely, all the possibilities which we have to grow up and to come out of anxiety and stress. And it sounds very, simple, and it is simple, but it's not easy to be concentrated on breath and keep concentrated on what is coming up in the moment. So it's a very intense practice. Everybody can do it. Remind yourself. This is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your takeaway of this episode here, George?
My takeaway is, as always, that when we engage in what I call our essential conversations with each other, but first and foremost with ourselves, those conversations become both enlightening and generative. And the primary, how those essential conversations begin, is by renewing our commitment to our inner relationship with self, with our heart, with our conscious and unconscious minds. And again, making friends with every aspect of ourselves. To build on what Heidi said, it is elegantly simple. The training, my training, conscious language again, my personal practice, the breathing practice, mindful breath practice, totals, the minimum commitment, totals about 250 breaths a day out of 21,900 breaths we take a day. So it's a fraction of a fraction. So it's elegantly simple. We rest our attention on our breath mindfully. We learn how to focus and refocus, commit and recommit. So in that sense, it's very elegantly simple. The reality is it's a practice, an exploration, a new way of being and relating with self that we will practice until we leave these earthly bodies. As I say, until we take our dirt nap. So it's a practice. It's rather than what the Western culture loves, which is instant gratification and the magic bullet and bumper stickerisms. It's a practice for our lifetime. If you look at the fact that we are only on purpose 3% of our lives, then if we upgrade our presence and purpose from 3 to 6%, that's still an increment, but we've doubled our presence, our productivity, our connection to our purpose, and suddenly the world looks shiny and it looks magical, and we can do that over and over and over again, incrementally moving into a greater level of awareness and consciousness, where we can, one, be on purpose and more connected to our purpose, and be better servants for our purpose and for each other.
Thank you so much, George. And if someone wants to connect with you, how shall they connect with you?
They can circle me on Google+. My contact information, including my direct phone number, is on my profile on Google+. And of course, they can log on to a website on my lower third here, which is themindfulnessadvantage.com.
Thank you so very much for this amazing special interview. And I must say that my takeaway is you have shared a very brief but succinct overview of what one can do to actually help and remedy the symptoms of racing thoughts and negative self-talk. So I thank you. And Heidi, do you want to mention anything more?
Just thank you for being here and having shared with us this deep conversation. And I'm happy that we are beginning to find each other to have this conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Awesome.
Been a pleasure and always gratifying and satisfying, again, to be connected in this way and to share our conversation, our connections with a greater, wider audience. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you and goodbye.